Okay, the second stage of this tutorial is going to begin by using the project that we built in the first stage of the tutorial. Um, all I'm going to do for the moment is demonstrate the basic data layers being loaded into the test application. So what I'm going to do is essentially use the green Add Data button on the tool strip in order to control the project and tell it that we need to add some data, and I can browse through my computer and we'll load some simple vector data, and then we'll load some image data. So in the sample data folder, we have some shape files, and we'll start with polygons. So we'll load some counties that are shaped to represent all the counties in the United States. And you can see that the polygons are color coordinated, so you've got slightly darker borders and a lighter fill color. Then we're going to add some roads, and the road data is significant because we have nice new symbology for the roads that's different from the older map window symbology, and this can have borders with fill color and looks fairly well drawn. Um, and then we're going to add, in the final stage, we're going to add some cities as point data sets. And the cities have yet another color symbology. Now we can change how these appear in the properties of each one. There's a thing called a symbolizer. Now the symbolizer basically contains all the information that we need to know for coloring or changing the visual properties of each of these layers. And so what we're going to do is change the point symbology to have a different shape from its original shape. So instead of an ellipse, I'd like it to show a star, and we'll make the size slightly larger. And that's a collection of purple stars. And as you can see, the map has several stars that appear near the roads and appear on top of the polygon counties which make up the background. And that's a pretty standard vector representation that you might get from other open source projects. We also have, in addition to the vector data, we can draw some basic two-dimensional images. So we're going to load some Idaho terrain. And that's a fairly large scale image that gets loaded onto the map. But because I've already loaded the vector layers, it's actually covering up those vector layers. So let's remove that layer and add something a little bit more cooperative. Let's go to the rasters. We'll add some elevation or terrain rasters, and you can see that essentially what you have is a color coordinated raster graphics. Each of the colors on this 2D image represents an elevation value. The shading that's been applied to this bitmap is calculated based on a light direction, and you can change those characteristics similar to the vector drawing. You can edit what's called a color scheme, and this brings up a dialog which you can use to affect the actual colors that you're using. I'm going to use this lightning bolt to bring up some predefined color schemes. I'm going to use glaciers. I'm going to apply the glaciers color scheme, and notice that I do not have the compute hillshade button checked. The result is that the image has a very ArcGIS raster kind of appearance. It does not look like a three-dimensional shaded relief. But if you want to add that, all you have to do when you're using the color scheme is check that Compute Hillshade button, and I'm going to apply, and we get a hill shading effect that applies to the image. So that basically demonstrates loading the standard data sets that are going to be used most frequently in GIS. Very quickly, I'll demonstrate that we do have some basic selection capability now that's built into this project. So you can control what it looks like when you select something through the properties for the moment, but that might change, so we're not going to focus on that for the moment. The buttons up here that are important, you can use the Zoom to Max Extents button to reset the view to the farthest extent for the project. And this is your pan option and a zoom button, but because you can zoom with the mouse wheel, I tend to use the pan option and then just use the mouse wheel to zoom in. And the resulting effect is that you have a pretty good vector layout, and you can use the checkboxes to turn on or off a layer as it's displayed. And you can also show the attributes of, for instance, a point data set. It brings up a data grid that is populated by a data table. Now, the important thing is not that this control exists. The important thing is that the data that's loaded into this is already in the format of a data table. So for programmers, this makes it very easy to coordinate the data table with existing data access controls or report controls. And I think that's the basic walkthrough for the 2D mapping project that I wanted to show off.